And welcome everyone to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. The headlines we're tracking for you at this hour. The Chinese economy maintained steady momentum in the first 7 months of the year. That's as new innovation-driven growth engines continued to gain strength. China's Belt and Road Initiative sees fruitful achievements over the past decade since the country's leadership first stressed mutually beneficial cooperation. And Japan's Q2 GDP missed forecasts, growing at an annualized pace of 1.1% as soft consumption and investment weighed on growth. All right, let's take a quick look first at the Chinese mainland markets, where equities closed higher on Monday across the board. The Shanghai Composite Index gaining over 1.4%, the Shenzhen Component rising 2.44%, and the Chinex Growth Board climbing north of 3% on the day. We'll have more details on the Chinese mainland markets later in the show. Now a look at how regional markets performed and how Wall Street closed out on Friday. Well, first up, China's economy maintained overall stability in the first 7 months of this year with a clear trend toward higher quality and innovation-driven growth. Industrial value-added output rose 5.3% year-on-year, with equipment manufacturing beating the sector average by 4.4 percentage points and high-tech manufacturing by 8.5 points. That's according to the National Bureau of Statistics on Monday. The Service Production Index climbed 4.7% from a year earlier, while total retail sales of consumer goods and services increased 2.6%, with services retail jumping 5%, fueled by strong gains in telecom, tourism, and leisure services. Foreign trade remained resilient, with total goods imports and exports surging some 17.3% on year. That's even as fixed asset investment edged lower when excluding property development. The job market stayed broadly stable, with the average urban surveyed unemployment rate at 5.2%, while consumer prices rose a modest 0.9% compared to a year ago. All right, for more on China's latest economic data, I want to bring in Shifan Qi, Associate Professor of Economics at Peking University. Professor Shi, welcome to the program as always. So give us the big picture first. What were your main takeaways from the latest economic numbers?
Thank you very much for the invitation. So as you've just described, so for the first half of the year is overall healthy picture. But for July, I think it is a little bit alarming because for this month, we are witnessing weakening in growth momentum, and we are also witnessing a fragile market confidence. But there are, of course, on the positive side, some stabilization in prices. To be more specific, we see in the latest months, the PMI data fell to 49.2, and the non-manufacturing PMI is even more alarming because it's now at 49, but whereas for the first half of the year, it's generally over 50, at least for non-manufacturing PMI. On the in the second aspect, we see that the financial market sentiment is deteriorating sharply. So for the Shanghai index, we see it fell by 8.6%, whereas for the China stock market, it fell by as much as 23%. So that's like the second largest month of decline. So on the third aspect, we do see some encouraging feature because we see the prices started to stabilize with CPI rising 0.5%, core CPI rising by 0.9%, whereas PPI rising 3.5% year on year.
So, Professor, how would you assess the progress of China's new innovation-driven growth drivers then?
Well, then for the innovation growth, I think we are indeed seeing real and increasingly important growth. But the important question is whether this technological development can translate into sustainable profits. So first of all, we do see, at least from the National Bureau of Statistics data, that there is real substantive economic evidence that this high technology growth is indeed driving up China's economy. So for the first half of the year, the value added in the high-tech manufacturing sector is growing by 13.3%. So that's much higher than the overall industrial production of 5.4%. And also, we see from foreign competitors, like especially from U.S. policymakers and companies, they increasingly describe AI as a direct U.S.-China technology race. And there are already some sanctions or discussions of sanctions in advanced chips, co-packaged optics, and unmanned aerial vehicle. So while those are geopolitical tensions, we do see that basically even the U.S. is acknowledging that China is really catching up fast. But as I pointed out, the major picture is whether this sustained growth in production can translate into profits. That's the more important part, because we've seen that historically China is known for a little bit of overproduction, overcapacity. For example, we are already seeing that a little bit in the new energy industry. So hopefully in this high-tech production, we will have more sustained growth.
So, Professor, what's your outlook then for the Chinese economy in the second half of the year?
Well, I think I'm still cautiously optimistic, but I have to admit that I would expect even greater uncertainty compared with the first half of the year. So in the first aspect, we see the important factor is whether, as I've just mentioned, this high-tech growth can translate into profits. And hopefully there will not be overproduction or overcapacity. In the second aspect, as I've just described in response to the first question, that consumer confidence is relatively low, at least in July. So we see that retail sales grows only by 0.6% compared with last year. So that's a very, very tiny growth. And also and even worse, we see fixed asset investment fell by 6.7% and real estate investment fell by 19.2%. So the real catch is whether there can be policies that can quickly help rebalance this. So historically, the government support has usually been towards those with externalities like a new energy industry. But we do see that the downside is that there will be likely overproduction. So the big question is whether the Chinese government can adjust quickly to support more consumer and producer confidence. So the last aspect that is important is about the external environment. So as I've just mentioned, that in the first half of the year, the Chinese economy is growing. Even though a little bit of tailwind, we do see some kind of growth. And a major reason is that we are witnessing very significant growth in both import and export. So with the uncertainty in global geopolitical tension, that's like the biggest question, whether this growth can sustain into the second half of the year.
Okay, we are going to leave it there. Professor Shi, many thanks for your insights as always. That's Shi Fanqi, Associate Professor at Peking University's School of Economics. Well, from manufacturing to logistics, traditional industries are being reshaped by breakthroughs in artificial intelligence and robotics. At the recently concluded World AI Conference in Shanghai, the emergence of steel-making robots capable of performing high-risk operations underscores just how far this transformation has come. Our Chen Tong has more.
This is the latest robot developed for use in steel production. It was developed by Turing Robotics, a subsidiary of Baosite, the technology arm of China Baowu Steel Group.
This robot can be used in the scenario of a steel converter, which is vital for testing molten steel quality in steel production. Traditionally, workers carry steel sampling rods from the sampling pump manually. The workplace is extremely dusty and hot, with strong heat radiation from the nearby converter. We plan to adopt robots to take over this work and keep staff away from this high-temperature hazardous area.
Baowu is one of the world's largest steel maker. Now the robots have already been used in Baowu's production line. Manufacturing may seem to have nothing to do with AI, but this industry is in urgent need of AI and new technologies to turn high-risk jobs into fully unmanned operations. In 2023, the steel giant achieved a lights-out factory, a fully automated production facility capable of operating around the clock with little to no on-site human intervention. This year, the company launched its AI 2.0 strategy, aiming to integrate artificial intelligence across its operations. From steel production and research to corporate governance and customer services, the initiative is designed to accelerate adoption of smart technologies throughout the business.
We've launched AI systems for converter furnace foremen and cold rolling operators. Trained on our years of production management know-how, they combine big data and large models to optimize scheduling, lift resource efficiency, boost safety, and ease labor burden, enabling a true lights-out factory.
Baowu is not the only manufacturer on show. 300 AI products are making their debut this year. The majority of them are techs utilized in auto and electronic production lines, helping to do repetitive, dirty, difficult, and dangerous jobs. Chen Tong, CGTN, Shanghai.
It's still to come here on Global Business. China's Belt and Road Initiative sees fruitful achievements over the past decade since the country's leadership first stressed mutually beneficial cooperation under the framework.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Well, today marks 10 years since Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a major speech on the Belt and Road Initiative at a symposium right here in Beijing. He called for steadily pushing the initiative forward to build infrastructure connectivity, boost trade, deepen financial cooperation, and benefit people living along the routes. Now, China has signed cooperation documents with over 150 countries since the initiative was first proposed back in 2013. In 2025, China's trade with participating countries reached some 23.6 trillion yuan, or nearly $3.3 trillion US dollars, a year-on-year increase of 6.3%. The momentum continued into the first quarter this year, with imports and exports growing by more than 14%. A trade with Belt and Road countries in the same period accounted for more than half of China's total foreign trade, a trend that has continued since the fourth quarter of 2023. Now, in 2025, China's non-financial direct investment in participating countries exceeded 283 billion yuan, or over 39 billion US dollars, in marking an increase of 18%. Meanwhile, the China-Europe Railway Express is an integral part of the Belt and Road Initiative. In the past 10 years, it has grown into one of the most active land-based trade routes, connecting China with 236 cities in 26 European countries. Our Zhou Yixin has more.
Over the past decade, more than 130,000 trips have been made on the China-Europe Railway Express, carrying more than 50,000 types of products. Chinese home appliances and new energy vehicles are shipped by rail to overseas markets, while bring precision equipment and agricultural products from Europe, along with minerals and grain from Central Asia, into the Chinese market. This two-way flow of goods is creating stronger links between producers and consumers, while deepening trade and industrial cooperation across Eurasia.
Countries along the routes have benefited greatly from the service. China supplies affordable, high-quality products, and it is also a huge market. This connectivity has made an important contribution to trade and economic growth across countries along the routes.
With broad coverage, reliable schedules, and relatively limited external disruption, the railway provides businesses with an alternative option to traditional shipping routes.
每当面临亚欧间海运航线运行受阻
Whenever maritime routes between Asia and Europe are disrupted or international supply chains come under pressure, the China-Europe Railway Express becomes an important transport solution for businesses. New routes through the Caspian Sea, Turkey, and Russia have also provided businesses with more diverse and resilient transport options.
As a flagship project under China's Belt and Road Initiative, the railway is opening up new opportunities and enabling more people and businesses to benefit from closer economic cooperation along the routes. Businesses are using the railway to build more efficient, cost-effective global production and distribution networks. Several inland Chinese cities have emerged as key gateways to international trade. At the same time, some European cities across the routes have grown into major logistics hubs, strengthening their role in trade and distribution across the EU. Officials say over the past decade, the China-Europe Railway Express has reshaped transport and trade across Eurasia, helped keep global industrial and supply chains stable, and brought new momentum to the world economy. Zhou Yixing, CGTN, Beijing.
All right, for more on the Belt and Road Initiative, I want to bring in Zhang Gong, professor of economics at the University of International Business and Economics. Professor Gong, welcome to the program as always. So, it's been 10 years since President Xi Jinping delivered a landmark speech at the Belt and Road Forum for International Cooperation held right here in the Chinese capital. It was 2013 when he first proposed the Belt and Road Initiative. Looking back, Professor Guo, what would you say are the most tangible achievements for China and BRI partner countries?
Well, I would say let's put things into perspective first. This is a time span of about 13 years, a total infrastructure-related investment of $1.4 to $1.5 trillion. Over 150 countries on average. We're talking about one country has received this kind of investment about $1.10 billion on average for each country. And if you really think about it, I mean, this is unprecedented in human history. One single country built a network of infrastructure in other countries, in a network of over 150 countries for a total amount of $1.4 to $1.5 trillion, including, ports, electric grids, telecommunication networks, railways, all these infrastructures over the entire planet. This is a huge gift, in my view, from China's perspective to the rest of the world. And looking back, this has been working out very well for both sides. We have extended our economic relations with these countries, and these countries benefit immensely from these infrastructure build-outs that accelerates their economic development and also improves their economic relationships, not just with China, but with the rest of the world as well. So I think this is a really, really a phenomenal achievement from a human development perspective. We are adding a huge infrastructure on this planet, mostly financed and built by China. And that's a huge gift to the rest of the world.
Right, Professor, I'm going to ask you about Chinese investment into Belt and Road countries, but first I want to ask you about trade, because trade with Belt and Road countries now accounts for over half of China's total foreign trade, and it's been quite consistent in the past few quarters. What has been the BRI's impact, though, in providing opportunities to sell into the vast Chinese market, especially for developing countries?
Well, I mean, trade is part of the motivations for starting the Belt and Road Initiative in the first place. It was a time when China finds out that a lot of countries have infrastructure handicap that can be further enhanced to increase trade between China and these countries. And there's plenty of this ample empirical evidence to illustrate that trade with these countries indeed increase a lot as a result of these infrastructure build-out. And as I said, it's a two-way street. These countries increase their exports to China. At the same time, we also increased our exports to these countries. And on top of this, there's also investment. BNR project leads to a lot of investment outward bound foreign direct investment from China to these countries. And let me also, make a very important point. As I said, this is unprecedented in human history, and I think it's a very unique set of a combination of a set of factors that make it possible, make it happen. China at the times happens to be a specialist in building infrastructures. We lead in a lot of technologies in building infrastructures. At the time, we have a very large trade surplus with a very large foreign exchange reserve so that we can afford to finance a lot of these projects. So now I can't even think of even one country can do this with a combination of all of these very important, indispensable factors. And indeed, I think, China was able to pull it off after about 13 years. And I doubt very much another country can replicate the same story in the near future, at least.
Yeah. Professor, I want to ask you about investment now because we were just reporting that China's non-financial direct investment into Belt and Road countries, that jumped by 18% in 2025. So this means, of course, creation of local jobs, the infrastructure that you were talking about, industrial upgrading that you were talking about. What's driving this strong investment momentum, especially as global investment, global trade, the global economy faces a lot of uncertainty and headwinds?
Yeah, well, I mean, there are a couple of reasons behind this. One obvious reason is that, we don't want to be enjoying the status of an exporter with a very large and sizable and sustained trade surplus. It's not going to be sustainable over the long run. So that means that we have to invest in these countries to create jobs and create manufacturing in these countries, to let these countries also share the benefits of further value added in a global value chain that is very much steered and knitted by Chinese companies. The second reason has a lot to do with the idea of industrial migration, historical industrial migration, as the idea that has been promulgated by Paul Krugman, quite a few years ago, in a theory about new economic geography. In other words, historically, manufacturing industrial base tend to migrate from Europe to North America, from North America to Asia, to countries like Japan, South Korea, to Taiwan, and now coming to China. And I argue that it's not going to stay in China forever. You're starting to see more and more of these sort of low-end manufacturing moving out of China into Africa, into Southeast Asia, into South America. This is just a natural economic forces at work. That's a very important reason. And as a result of China's rising labor costs, living standards going up, and also, other factors of production, costs of factors of production also have been rising. This has to do with the trade theory called the factor price equalization. Our factor prices are actually getting very close to that of Japan, that of South Korea. And naturally, you would expect that some of these low-end manufacturing companies would be moving into other lower-cost countries. And then there are a couple of other reasons. So I think it's very natural to be expected. I think the good thing is that it brings jobs to these countries. It also makes these countries more and more industrialized. I think it's a very important concept here. We're starting to see more and more Belt and Road partner countries getting industrialized as a result of Chinese manufacturing moving to these countries, as a result of we build infrastructures in these countries that enable these manufacturing. So I think this I want to emphasize that it's a two-way street benefiting both sides.
Two-way street. It is truly about win-win cooperation when it comes to the Belt and Road Initiative. Professor, always great chatting with you. That's Professor Zhang Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. Thank you as always. Now, when we talk about China-Africa trade, the headlines usually focus on the big numbers. Billions of dollars in imports and exports, record growth and new agreements. But behind those numbers, the way goods are now being sold, distributed and used is also changing. Our Zhang Shixuan looks at how e-commerce and local business networks are reshaping parts of this massive trading relationship.
China has been the world's largest online retail market for more than a decade. And increasingly, some of that e-commerce infrastructure is being used to bring overseas products into the Chinese market. In the first half of this year, for example, sales of Kenyan coffee on major cross-border e-commerce platforms monitored by China's Ministry of Commerce rose more than 87%. Roughly 2,000 years ago, an evolving network of land and maritime trade routes linked China with other parts of Asia and Europe, and over time, Africa. Goods traveled along those routes, but so did ideas, technologies, and culture. Today, China is borrowing that old imagery for a very modern trading channel, e-commerce. Under the Belt and Road Initiative, China has developed what it calls Silk Road e-commerce, a network of bilateral cooperation mechanisms designed to expand digital trade. China says the network now includes 36 partner countries, with e-commerce platforms being used to help products from those markets reach Chinese consumers.
Sales of products from Silk Road e-commerce partner countries including Laos, New Zealand, Singapore, Thailand, and Estonia have continued to grow relatively quickly. Tmall Global is also working with partner countries to explore new ways for small and medium-sized overseas brands to enter the Chinese market. For example, the Thai fashion overseas flagship store opened on Tmall Global this July with support from Thailand's Department of International Trade Promotion. It plans to introduce 50 Thai fashion brands exclusively to the platform by the end of the year.
The idea is to use China's existing e-commerce infrastructure, its platforms, logistics network, and payment systems to lower some of the barriers facing overseas brands trying to enter the Chinese market. The system reaches well beyond Africa, but it is becoming one channel for African products to reach Chinese consumers as the broader trading relationship continues to grow.
The center of gravity in global goods trade is shifting increasingly toward the global south. China's foreign trade remains resilient and dynamic. As our market diversification efforts continue to take effect, foreign trade is moving beyond growth in scale toward a new stage focused on higher quality and mutual benefit.
China's trade with Africa grew nearly 20% year-on-year in the first half of 2026. Customs officials say newer forms of trade, including cross-border e-commerce and overseas warehouses, are also making it easier for smaller businesses to reach foreign markets.
New forms of trade are developing rapidly, significantly lowering the barriers to going global and making it easier and more efficient for small and medium-sized businesses to expand into international markets. In the first half of this year, China's cross-border e-commerce exports to the global south through overseas warehouses increased more than fourfold, outpacing overall growth in overseas warehouse exports. Over the same period, market procurement trade exports to global south markets rose 16.2%, accounting for two-thirds of China's total exports through that trade channel.
But the numbers only tell us what crosses the border. What happens after a product reaches an African market? Who sells it, repairs it, adapts it, and uses it to make a living can tell us much more about how trade becomes part of the local economy.
Take a motorcycle. Once it arrives, it can be continually adapted and repurposed by local African dealers, mechanics, motorcycle taxi drivers, market vendors, and community intermediaries. What begins as an exported industrial product takes on a new social life. Mobile phone components and solar equipment can go through a similar process. The competitiveness of Chinese products isn't only about their advantages in price and performance. It also extends to whether local workers can use them, repair them, resell them, or use them to generate other forms of income.
And this is the less visible part of the trading relationship. China-Africa trade is growing quickly, but understanding how that relationship is changing means looking not only at how much is being bought and sold. A transaction may begin when a product is bought and shipped, but its economic life doesn't necessarily end when it clears customs. A motorcycle can support drivers and mechanics. Equipment can be repaired and resold. A product imported from China can become part of a much wider local network of businesses and workers. Zhang Shixuan, SMG International for CGTN, Shanghai.
And up next here on Global Business. Japan's Q2 GDP missed forecasts, growing at an annualized pace of 1.1%. That's as soft consumption and investment weighed on growth.
A vast land of 1.4 billion people. The world's second largest economy. Home to stories of the unexpected, the unimaginable, the breathtaking. Stories that touch the soul. Feel the speed, the passion. Enjoy spectacular natural and cultural landscapes. Feel the thrill of cutting-edge innovations. Discovering China. Global Biz. China Travel. We present to China never seen before. 24/7 at your fingertips.
All right, let's check how equity markets here on the Chinese mainland, over in Hong Kong and Tokyo, kicked off the week. Tim Pope is standing by for us in Shanghai. Tim, so the Chinese mainland markets had another buoyant Monday. What were you following today?
Hi there, Michael. Yeah, it was another positive Monday for the Chinese mainland stock markets. Tech was, of course, the big story all day, and the rebound for semiconductor shares only got more pronounced as the session went on. So by the close of trade, the Shanghai Composite Index was up 1.4%, the Shenzhen Component up 2.4%, the Chinex 3.1%, and the Star 50 more than 4%. Tech was, as I said, far and away the best performing sector. There was a sub-index tracking semiconductors rising 5%. Memory chip makers also did really well. CXMT added 12%. There are more and more predictions of increasingly tight memory chip supplies, even going through 2027. And we heard SK Hynix warning that next year could see the worst memory chip shortage the industry has ever experienced. Today's rally, though, took place before we got the latest economic data showing slowing industrial output and weaker than expected retail sales for July. Those will doubtless be reflected in tomorrow's opening. Also ahead this week, we've got China's monthly decision on benchmark lending rates, the LPR. Also this week, the World Robot Conference in Beijing, which I'm sure will have plenty to showcase in embodied AI to get investors excited, and Zhongji InnoLight results right at the end of the week will give us an insight into profits and valuations in AI infrastructure and its supply chain, Michael.
And Tim, what about the other Asian markets? It looked like more of a mixed picture around the region today.
Yeah, it was. There was a bit of a split between Hong Kong and Tokyo. Hong Kong's rebound was looking pretty strong today. The Hang Seng added 1.5%. There too, of course, semiconductors were the big gainers. SMIC rose 6.1%. It's now gained about 13.6% over the last 5 sessions. And late last week, it reported strong results and said it was upping its prices. JD.com started off lower but ended up rising 2.5% today, recovering a little bit from Friday's more than 10% loss, which came after the e-commerce giant reported its first quarterly revenue decline since its 2014 listing. Profit was actually up, though, so it wasn't all doom and gloom. Speaking of quarterly results, it's another big week ahead in Hong Kong as far as that's concerned. Xiaomi and Baidu are scheduled for tomorrow. The index provider HKEX on Wednesday, and Ping An Insurance and NetEase later on in the week. That HKEX result will be a particularly interesting one to watch, I think, because of the pace of listings we've seen so far in Hong Kong this year and what impact that's going to have on earnings. Over in Tokyo today, the market was broadly lower following a fairly weak quarterly GDP rating. The Nikkei 225 managed to climb 0.75% by the close, but that was really only because of some strong gains for a handful of chip and AI sector names. Most Nikkei shares were actually falling today, and the broader Topics index was down about 1/3%. GDP for the quarter expanded 0.3% for the 3 months to June, but that's an annualized 1.1%, which is quite a bit below the median forecast of 2% annualized. And there's a pretty constant drip feed of more Japanese economic data right through this week. But the big release will be consumer inflation on Friday. That CPI reading for July is going to be pretty closely watched, I think, because energy and food costs are expected to push inflation higher again, and that could add to pressure that's already mounting on the Bank of Japan to raise interest rates again.
Okay, Tim, many thanks for that update as always. Tim Pope for us in Shanghai. All right, in other headlines we are tracking at this hour, as Tim was saying, Japan's economy growing at a slower than expected pace in April to June due to lackluster household spending and business investment. The country's GDP growing at 1.1% year-on-year on an annualized basis in the second quarter, missing a media market estimate of 2% in a Reuters poll and below an upwardly revised 1.9% expansion in the previous quarter. Germany's direct investment in the United States dropped to a 3-year low in the first half of this year. The total value was down by nearly 2/3 from a year ago and almost 80% below the same period back in 2024. Experts say rising costs from U.S. tariffs have prompted German companies to reassess long-term investment decisions. And the Dutch economy is projected to grow by 1.4% this year before slowing to 1.2% next year amid considerable international uncertainty. Researchers say strong exports and increased government spending are expected to support economic growth. Meanwhile, the grape harvest over in France's Champagne region has officially begun, marking its earliest start on record. This year's earlier than usual picking comes after a summer of record-breaking heat. Our correspondent Siobhan McCall has more.
An exceptionally early harvest. Around 100,000 grape pickers are expected in Champagne over the next few weeks. All fruit is picked by hand as per centuries-old tradition for the famous drink named after its home region.
When I was a child, the harvest was after the start of the school year, so it was during the last week of September or even more towards October, a rather cool period.
The harvest is on average 20 days earlier than it was 30 years ago, and the average temperature in the Champagne region rose by 1.8 degrees between 1961 and 2020.
It's not surprising, yet it's very surprising at the same time, because it's happening at an incredible speed and with incredible intensity. Not so long ago, we never would have imagined starting the harvest in the first weeks of August.
This all provides a dilemma for winemakers. If they harvest early, it helps reduce the amount of sugar in the fruit, but it risks upsetting the balance of acidity, something that gives Champagne its famous fresh and crisp flavour. Water shortages are also contributing to a lower yield this year. And there are economic challenges too. Threats of 100% tariffs in Champagne's biggest export market, the United States, and cost-conscious buyers looking for cheaper alternatives.
Since the vineyard is here and will outlive us, it's up to us to adapt. And then, little by little, perhaps we need to make our consumers accept that there will be a transition towards champagne profiles that will change a little bit as well.
For some places, climate change is providing an opportunity. Rising temperatures in southern England are allowing winemakers there to successfully grow grapes traditionally associated with the premier wine-producing regions. But Champagne, a region and industry steeped in tradition, is now having to think about transition as scorching summers become the norm. Siobhan McCall, CGTN.
And Spain is the world's biggest producer of olive oil, employing hundreds of thousands of people and even millions during peak harvest months. But this year, extreme heat over there and drought are posing unprecedented threats to the industry, with experts warning that another food price crisis could be on the way. Our Ken Brown has more from Toledo.
Olive oil, this liquid gold. It's the lifeblood of communities here in Spain and the inspiration behind this Fiesta del Olivo en Mora, the region of Castilla-La Mancha. It celebrates a 3,000-year-old history, and here in the Toledo province they produced 35,000 tons of olive oil last year, while nationally Spain accounts for over half the world's production. Culturally, olives are a way of life here in Spain. Geographically, they're everywhere. Hundreds of millions of productive trees in olive groves like this one cover almost 3 million hectares. That's nearly the size of Belgium. But a perfect storm is gathering. Climate change, freak weather events, wildfires, the rise in the cost of fertilizer, US tariffs, wars, and now the El Niño weather phenomenon. This year's 35,000 tons of olive oil produced in Toledo is a big drop from the 54,000 tons the previous year, and it's a similar story being told across the country.
Between
the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the war in Iran, our last study shows that our costs have risen by 57%. That means that up to 3/4 of Spanish olive plantations are now operating at a loss.
And the problem isn't just confined to Spain either. Europe's climate is heating at twice the rate of the rest of the world, and food production numbers are plummeting.
Just this year in Europe, there's an estimate that the June heat wave alone caused losses of $2 billion to farmers. That's 9 million tons of grain. I reported on a study recently that estimated that climate change alone was already sort of causing $20 billion of losses a year to farmers worldwide. And the thing is, that was looking at just 3 crops. That was just wheat, soybeans, and maize.
The problem will be exacerbated by El Nino, he says.
It's by far the strongest El Nino we've ever had. So, I mean, the numbers are staggering. And there's a forecast already from Goldman Sachs that this could lead to food prices going up 16% just from this El Nino. So that's a huge food shock.
In Spain, they call it El Super Nino. But despite the record temperatures and wildfires, there often seems to be a dissonance between scientists looking at macro data and farmers and industry leaders on the ground. Jose Maria points to prices of petrol or gas, labour and fertiliser going up because of wars in Ukraine and Iran. Eusebio García de la Cruz, CEO of the family olive business, points to poor water management as the problem.
Water is the oil of the future, and especially in an area like ours. The Spanish economy would be much better off with correct and more efficient management of its water.
He insists that higher prices for olive oil are justified.
If 1 litre of olive oil costs €4 more, is that a big deal? That's the price of 2 or 3 coffees.
The one thing they do agree on, however, is that the price of food is set to skyrocket again. Ken Brown, CGTN in Toledo, Spain.
And that's going to wrap up this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Coming up next is The World Today with Li Chuyuan. Stay tuned.
Coming up in Global Business. Economic momentum. China's economy remained broadly stable in the first 7 months of 2026, with stronger growth in advanced manufacturing, digital transformation and foreign trade. Future-proofing. China issues its plan for oil and gas development, as well as renewables during the 15th five-year plan period to bolster national energy security. And slower growth. Japan's economic output in the second quarter missed forecasts as soft consumption and investment weigh on growth. Welcome to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Vivienne Nunes. China's economy remained broadly stable in the first 7 months of the year as it registers stronger growth in advanced manufacturing, digital transformation and foreign trade. CGTN's Dai Kai has this report.
This year, China's industrial production continued to grow at a solid pace. The National Bureau of Statistics says industrial output rose 5.3% year-on-year in the first 7 months. Equipment manufacturing and high-tech manufacturing both grew faster than the overall industrial sector. Production of 3D printers, lithium-ion batteries, and industrial robots also posted strong growth.
China's economic vitality is being seen in 3 main areas: industrial upgrading, digital transformation, and foreign trade growth. Innovation is playing a bigger role in driving growth, while industrial upgrading is gaining momentum.
Foreign trade also remains strong. China's imports and exports of goods grew more than 17%, supported by its complete industrial system and improving product quality. Prices remain broadly stable, with the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, up 0.9% year-on-year.
Overall, the national economy remained stable in the first 7 months, while continuing to move toward higher quality growth. But we also need to recognize that the external environment remains complex and volatile. Domestically, weak demand remains a challenge. Some businesses are facing difficulties, and the foundation for a steady recovery still needs to be strengthened.
The spokesperson says geopolitical tensions and global energy market uncertainty are adding to the pressure. Extreme weather at home has also disrupted supply and demand in some regions, but stronger policy support has helped keep the economy on a steady footing, while new sources of growth continue to gain momentum. 戴凯怡 CGTN 北京。
In Shanghai, robots have graduated from laboratory innovations to emerge as a driving force behind China's next wave of export growth. Let's take a look.
Do you still think robots are just playful companions that dance, run marathons, and practice Tai Chi? Overseas, Chinese robots have become synonymous with efficient production. Handling robots excel in service and construction industries. Maturely engineered cleaning robots are gaining traction in households worldwide. At one of Shanghai's little giant robotic tech firms, its lab tests the latest humanoid robots. Its lineup spanning delivery, cleaning, and humanoid robots operates in over 70 countries globally.
Overseas revenue accounts for over half of our total business. Our key markets lie in developed economies, including Europe, the US, Japan, and South Korea. We lead the global service robot sector with more than 20% of the market share, with our food delivery robots holding over 40%. Our diversified export portfolio benefits from Shanghai's smart tech industrial cluster, robust supply chains and geographic strengths, as well as our proprietary technology backed by over 1,100 patents.
And at Yangshan Port in Shanghai, Chinese-built robots are being shipped to Southeast Asia, Europe, and North America. And Shanghai Customs data shows robot exports through Shanghai Port hit over 8.3 billion yuan in the first 5 months of 2026, representing 42.5% of China's national total and topping all ports. Cleaning robots dominate exports with over 70%. Smart bionic robots registered 120 million yuan in exports, kicking off the first global commercial wave of lab-borne embodied intelligence.
China switched from a net importer to a net exporter of industrial robots in 2025, a shift clearly visible at ports. Vessel declarations show a marked rise in outbound containers. At Nangang Terminal, exports of robots and smart equipment have surged, far outstripping imports. This highlights high-value, tech-intensive domestic smart manufacturing goods emerging as a new pillar of China's foreign trade.
Recently, China's AGI Boat's G2 robot has got the CE certification in the EU and access approvals in the US. Unitree Robotics opens its ecosystem for overseas users' further development. And overseas expansion of Chinese robots goes beyond mere product sales, involving into deep ecological cooperation.
China unveiled its 15th five-year plan for oil and natural gas development on Monday, targeting both energy security and green transition. By 2030, the plan aims to raise domestic oil and gas supply to 440 million tonnes of oil equivalent, add 20,000 kilometres of long-distance pipelines, and expand the national pipeline network to 220,000 kilometres, while boosting gas storage to over 13% of consumption. It also pushes for a peak in oil consumption, support for green fuels, and infrastructure pilots for hydrogen blending and methanol transport via existing pipelines. The plan also prioritises infrastructure and technological upgrades for hydrogen and green fuels, aiming to build a new production, storage, transport system that favours local consumption while allowing cross-regional and international coordination. Late last month, nearly 4 tonnes of green ammonia produced in Jilin was shipped to the Republic of Korea. The milestone delivery marks China's wind, solar, hydrogen, ammonia industrial chain moving beyond technical trials into large-scale international commercial supply. Reporter Guan Yang has the story.
What is green ammonia? It starts with wind and solar power, which generate clean electricity to produce green hydrogen. That hydrogen is then converted into zero-carbon green ammonia. Backed by the internationally recognized ISCC EU certification, products from this project can now be certified for and supplied to global markets.
Only with this certification can our green ammonia enter the European market, and EU market access serves as a credential for entry into the global market. In the future, shipping companies will face exorbitant fines if they skip low-carbon transformation, underscoring the urgency of green energy adoption.
Wind and solar electricity cannot be shipped cross-border practically, and the green hydrogen entails extremely high transportation costs due to its physical properties. That is why Chinese engineers choose to convert renewable power into green ammonia for export.
There was no prior precedent for pairing fluctuating wind and solar power with stable chemical production facilities. We faced major uncertainties over operational safety and project profitability. In the early stage of the project, we conducted multiple rounds of in-depth analysis and demonstrations with research institutes, power grid companies, and government authorities.
Wind and solar power are intermittent, while green hydrogen faces storage and shipping hurdles. That's exactly where green ammonia steps in, turning volatile renewable energy into easy to transport and zero carbon fuel.
This batch of green ammonia cuts over 10,000 tons of CO2 compared with conventional coal-based ammonia, equivalent to the annual carbon sequestration of around 1 million trees. And technical upgrades will be carried out to optimize production procedures.
Wind and solar power generation is intermittent, leading to fluctuating hydrogen production in electrolyzers and unstable waste heat output. We are in urgent need of developing equipment that can fully utilize such variable heat sources to further save energy and reduce emissions.
Green ammonia is expected to play a vital role in the future energy market. The project provides a replicable Chinese model for advancing the global green and low-carbon energy transition. Guanyang, CGTN.
This is Global Business. Still to come. Slower growth. Japan's economic output in the second quarter missed forecasts as soft consumption and investment weighed on growth.
A vast land of 1.4 billion people. The world's second largest economy. Home to stories of the unexpected, the unimaginable, the breathtaking. Stories that touch the soul. Feel the speed, the passion. Enjoy spectacular natural and cultural landscapes. Feel the thrill of cutting-edge innovations. Discovering China. Global Biz. China Travel. We present a China never seen before. 24/7 at your fingertips.
Now to some other business headlines that we're tracking across the globe. Japan's economy grew at an annualised 1.1% in April to June, missing forecasts of 2% and slowing from 1.9% in the previous quarter. Private consumption softened due to higher raw material costs and supply disruptions linked to the Middle East conflict. Singapore's non-oil domestic exports rose 24% in July, driven by a 110% surge in electronic shipments led by disc media products and integrated circuits. Singapore has raised its 2026 growth forecast, betting that AI-related demand will help cushion the economy from Middle East conflict fallout. And in the US, a newly released Financial Times poll shows that more than 53% of registered voters think their finances have deteriorated since Trump took office in January 2025. The findings come as inflation remains elevated, and economists warn that public discontent over the cost of living could hurt Republicans in the midterms. Moving to global trade now. Trade talks between Canada and the United States are continuing in an effort to come to some kind of agreement that might avert stiff new tariffs from taking effect next week. The Trump administration's threatened 50% levies would hit hundreds of Canadian goods, provoking real anxiety among many in the business community. Nina DeVries has more from Toronto.
This is a collection of Canadian products.
Martin Richards is concerned about next week's looming deadline, when new 50% tariffs are set to take effect. 70% of his customers are in the U.S., he says.
I'm sort of sitting on a perch ready to fall off.
He's the president of Imperial Productions and Distribution, Inc., which designs and sells about 10,000 architectural building products, such as domes, fireplace mantles, and medallions. He says the wood the company uses would be hit by the latest proposed tariffs, and it's confusing, not knowing how he should adjust his financial planning.
Confusion being, how do I adjust 10,000 products, alter all the calculations, alter all the Excel files, do all of those things which are normally automated.
His clients can order months in advance for a product, and now he has to explain to them about the possible tariffs they may have to pay.
Any quotes that I've done in the last year now are all null and void because the tax would be the 50%.
He says he has clients who have already canceled orders over concern about the proposed tariffs. He's certainly not alone. Businesses across Canada are bracing for these new tariffs that could go into effect August 19th. One strategy to limit the impact is to increase business ties with countries beyond the U.S.
What we've seen is a lot of businesses pivot to Europe, pivot to Asia, and quite frankly, a lot of them pivot to try to find new markets within Canada as the U.S. has become, in their view, a less and less reliable trading partner.
There is also hope in Canada that current trade talks with Washington might lead to a renewal of the Canada-U.S.-Mexico Agreement, also known as CUSMA in Canada. In July, the Trump administration said it did not want to extend the deal beyond 2036.
According to a report for the Canadian American Business Council, if CUSMA completely breaks down, there could be over 100,000 job losses in Canada and over 200,000 job losses in the United States.
Meanwhile, local media outlets have reported that Canada is considering some concessions to the U.S. in exchange for tariff relief, such as lifting bans on U.S. alcohol sales. But the Canadian Prime Minister would have to convince individual provinces and territories to act, as the bans are under their jurisdiction.
I think, if he comes to the provinces on Monday or Tuesday and has something really concrete, some major agreement, then it's possible that he would be able to persuade Ontario and BC and Quebec to relax this boycott. But if he comes with nothing, there's no way that it's going to happen.
As for Martin Richards, for now, he's just trying to manage as best he can in the uncertainty of it all.
So I don't know what is going to occur. I wish I did. And then, you could plan accordingly.
A feeling likely shared among many across Canada. Nina DeVries, CGTN, Toronto.
Meanwhile, the European Union has raised tariffs on Chinese-made tyres. But importers warn the new duties could push up prices for drivers. Hungary is a major tyre producer and key distribution hub. Pablo Gutierrez has this report from Budapest.
This warehouse is filled with tires from China. Supergumi is one of Hungary's biggest importers, supplying customers looking for lower cost options. But now that business is facing a new barrier.
Obviously, I wasn't very happy with it. It's a huge blow for a competitive market. We don't work with European brands, only with Chinese brands. We had to find new solutions, different brands who have factories outside of China.
Sujev's family has been importing Chinese-made tires for more than 3 decades. Before the tariffs were announced in July, his company carried 8 Chinese brands. After the announcement, he had to drop 2 because the higher cost would make their tires too expensive for consumers.
From 4.3% to 45.3%. That is the tariff that the European Union has placed on Chinese-made tires. They say that this is going to help competition here in Europe. They say that Chinese-made tires were unfairly priced, but experts say this move is going to change the tire industry here in Europe. Sujeb says some Chinese tire makers will struggle to compete in Europe because their tires are produced exclusively in China and are now subject to higher tariffs. And the impact is already showing up in prices.
I think both European and Chinese had their own space in the market.
Industry experts say Chinese tires have become a strong competitor in Europe. Improvements, they say, in quality put more pressure on domestic manufacturers.
European manufacturers cannot make major developments because they simply do not have the money anymore. In China, there is money and investment. We saw it with electric cars. Look at where they started and where they are now. I see the same thing happening in the tyre market. They have developed tremendously.
For European tire makers, the tariffs could mean more room to compete. For Chinese companies, they could mean moving production to EU countries. For importers, they mean higher costs. And for drivers, it could ultimately mean paying more for their next set of tires or looking for cheaper options.
Whenever it's about tariffs, it's always the customer, the final person who pays the tariffs. An importer will always put the tariffs price on the tire, doesn't matter how much is it.
The EU says the tariffs are designed to protect European industry, but in Hungary, where Chinese tires fill warehouses like this one, the impact could be ultimately felt at the checkout. Pablo Gutierrez, CGTN, Budapest.
China has launched a new shipping route to Europe via the Arctic Ocean, cutting travel time by half. The weekly summer service departs from Ningbo Zhoushan port in Zhejiang province and will reduce the journey by 20 days compared with routes like the Suez Canal. Ships will traverse the Northeast Passage before stopping at ports in Northern Europe and the Baltic Sea. The Arctic navigation season typically runs from July to October. Operators will deploy up to 8 ice-strengthened vessels for the new route.
Our trial voyages last year verified a 20-day one-way transit from Ningbo to Felixstowe, saving nearly 20 days compared with traditional routes. The Arctic Passage effectively protects temperature-sensitive cargoes from extreme summer heat on the Suez Canal and Cape of Good Hope routes. It also avoids frequent bottlenecks such as waterway congestion, unstable schedules, and rising shipping costs.
We reserve dedicated berths to ensure immediate berthing upon vessel arrival and prompt departure after cargo completion. In coordination with maritime and customs authorities, we prioritize the clearance of key and inspection-required containers, efficiently reducing vessel port stay and ensuring high-efficiency operation of the Arctic weekly route.
Still to come on Global Business. We take a look at one of the largest production sites for EV batteries in Europe as a new assembly line operated by China's CATL begins operation.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global Business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.